In this video, we are going to solve problems on Boolean values, comparison operators, and logical operators. Well, let's look at this first question. It says, write a program that prints got you when user inputs an even number. Well, now think about this question, how to solve that. You can pause the video and think on your own. Well, the way the program will behave is actually dependent on the user input. So that's a kind of different, that's a unique behavior. So if the user inputs an odd number, well, computer will not print got you. So what we're gonna do for that is to use a Boolean variable. What is a Boolean variable? Boolean value exactly. Well, Boolean value is actually a kind of data type that actually stores the truthfulness of an information. Say, for example, 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. That's a mathematical statement, and it has two results. It has two solutions in Boolean type. One is true or false. It can either be true or false. But because 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, well, it's true. What if we said 1 plus 1 equals to 3? Well, in that case, it would be false, obviously. So this is actually a very useful tool for us in such circumstances. Now, in order to solve that problem, we will actually divide the number by 2. If the remainder of that division is 0, we will say, well, it is actually an even number, but if it's not 0, well, it's an odd number, but yeah. So at first, what to do? We need to get the input from the user. Number equals to float input. What is the number? I'll ask here and just have a new line right here. So why did I say float? Because I just said that I will divide the number by 2. So we need the input to be a number. But in Python, when we get an input, the input is automatically observed as a string. Meaning that when I say 5, computer will actually understand it as a character of 5, just like the $sign or any other letter in the alphabet. So we will not be able to do proper mathematical calculations on it. So in order to do that, we actually converted the string into the float, which will allow us to input any number, including the decimal types. And then we will create a variable called isEven. So what is it? It's a type of standard. When you are trying to store a value of Boolean type, the variable usually starts with is. So to decide the truthfulness, to store the truthfulness of this expression, we will say number divided by 2 is actually equal to 0. Like the remainder of this division is 0. Well, we have stored the truthfulness of this expression. Now we will use this truthfulness value in an if statement. So how it's going to be like? I will say if is even print got you, just like in the description. Well, here, what's going to happen? Let's say number is 5. Well, let's run the program. It says, what is the number? I say 5. It did not print got you because 5 is not odd. It's not even. So I say, what is number? Well, I say 4. It says got you. Why? Because let's go step by step. We put it 4. It converted into the float type 4. And then we came here. It's a variable. Computer read it and says, okay, it's a variable. Python saw this sign, said, okay, I'm going to assign something, and started to evaluate this part. Notice that this equal sign is not the same as this. This equal sign indicates that we're going to solve the right side of this equal sign, and whatever value we get will be attended to this variable. So if we got the output of true here, well, true is going to be the value of is even. So now what a computer did actually to evaluate this part. While evaluating this part, computer actually divided number by 2 and got the remainder. So our number was 4. We divided 4 by 2. We got 2 and the remainder was 0. And this thing says is equal to 0. So 0 is indeed equal to 0. And that's why this part of the calculation became true. So when we got the value as true, is even got equal to true. And then here we came here. If is a kind of weird. I mean, it just works in a different way. That just as we just said, it makes the computer decide on the circumstances. That's what we were actually meaning. So it says if is even, print got you. So if this is true, this will be printed. This block here will be executed. But if it's not true, this part will not be executed. So that is why it was true. When it was 4, the is even became true. And if true, print that. Yeah, it was true indeed. And we got the output of true. Got you. And here's a little bit of information. If you think that it looks ugly to print such a simple thing in 2 lines, you can actually write it as such in 1 line. If the only thing that you want to print, if the block is only consisting of 1 line, you can do that. So let's run it again. I say 0. Well, it says got you, meaning that it works. Now let's look at the second question. Consider a basketball match. Write a program that prints the type of the shot based on the distance between the player and the basket. Any shot within 7 meters of the basket's radius is counted as 2-point shot, and anything outside this radius is counted as 3-point shot, meaning that if the distance between the basket and the player is more than 7 meters, is actually 3-point shot. So the user inputs the distance between the player and the basket. So let's get into it. First, what we need to do is to get the distance, because it's as given in the description, says user inputs the distance. So distance is equal to what type of data is the distance going to be? Of course, it's going to be a number value. So we're gonna say float. We don't want it to be a string of characters. We want it to be an actual number. So float input distance, we'll ask from the user. Then we will create 2 Boolean values, variables for that. The first one is, let's call it is 2-point shot. Is 2-point shot. So what will it do? That it will judge the statement based on the distance. Like, it will judge the distance based on the fact whether it's 2-point shot or not. So how can we define that? A shot, the minimum value a shot can be thrown, a ball can be thrown is more than 0 meters. So the minimum value is 0. So distance is greater than 0 and is less than or equal to 7. Well, what will it do? We will input the distance. Let's say the player was 5 meters away from the basket, and the program will come here and read a variable and do this consideration. And we will think, well, let's see, 0 is less than 5. Yeah, that's great. And it's less than 7 or equal to 7. Well, that's true as well. So meaning that it is actually a true value. They will return a true value here, and this true will be assigned to this variable. What if it's 8, right? What if it's thrown 8 meters away from the basket? Well, 0 is less than 8, and that is less than or equal to, well, 0 is less than 8, well, that's true, and 8 is less than or equal to 7. Well, that part is not right. So this in this time, this will be counted as false. And let's do the same for the 3-point shot. Let's just do it. And then here goes the conditionals. Now this is the part where computers should decide what to do. So we will say if is 2-point shot. Well, if it is true, do that. Print, well, not like so actually. Print 2-point shot. Well, what if it's not 2-point shot? What if it's 3-point shot? What is gonna happen next? Well, is 3-point shot. Well, this gonna happen. It will print 3-point shot. What if it's none of them? So, is there a case possible? Well, it is. And it is the case when the input is less than 0. It will say, well, this will be false if it is less than 0. This as well will be 0, false. So when the both cases are false, none of them will be executed. And for that reason, we can define a escape choice in which program will print this block. Print, are you serious? Because you cannot throw a ball from 0 meters or negative meters, right? So yeah, in this case, what the computer will do, if this is wrong, if that is wrong as well, computer will choose this regardless of the conditions. Like, it will not care about the things, anything else. So if that one is right, it will not look at here anymore because computer has made the decision. He will skip this part and go here. Let's run this program. There we go. It asks us for the distance. Let's say 5. Well, 5 is indeed a 2-point shot. When I input 8, it says 3-point shot, which is right as well. When I input -8, well, it will say, are you serious? Because, again, none of those cases are actually fulfilled. And since both of them are false, there is no way out of it. Now let's look at the last question. To log into the admin panel, one needs to write username, password, and the lucky number correctly. Lucky number is any negative integer that is divisible by 8 and is divisible by either 3 or 7 or both. If logged in successfully, program should print in logged in, otherwise it should print no access. And there are some predefined username and passwords, which should be the same as the user input. Now, I suggest you to pause the video and think of it on your own. At first, what we're gonna do is to define variables. The default variables, the default password and username, which we need to input. And then we will take the input from the user. So because the username and password has to be characters, not numbers or whatsoever, we don't touch it because it's a default type of storage for user input. It's going to be a string. And there's a number. Number should obviously be integer since we're asked a integer. So we will convert that string into a integer. So yeah, now we will define some Boolean variables. This is the most important part of this problem. Is username equals to sign and username equals, what does it mean? Is that we take a variable called isUsername. It's just by convention that the Boolean type variables are usually starting with is. The value, whatever we have here, the value of this part will be assigned to this part. This part will have the same value as that part. So if username is the same as the username input, well, it will output true, and this will have a true value. And then we keep going, and we will apply the same thing to the password. And then we're left with checking if the number is lucky or not. We'll create a variable called if lucky, and then look at the description. What it says: lucky number is any negative integer, so it has to be negative. It has to be negative. So what I'm going to do now is to say number is less than 0. It's indeed negative. That is divisible by 8. So there's another statement. So this and this being negative and being divisible by 8 should happen in the same time. So that's why we will use logical operator of AND, meaning that they both has to be true in order to output a single true output. So what do you mean? What I mean by both is the left side of AND, number is less than 0, and the right side, which is number divided by 8 is equal to 0. It's not actually division, but the remainder of the number divided by 8 is actually 0. And there's another condition that we need to think about, that it says and is divisible by either 3 or 7 or both. So it has to be divisible by one of those, 2, 3, or 7. What I'm going to do is to make an AND statement here, and I will open a parenthesis inside of which I will check if it is divisible by one of those 2. But we know that it's a must for it to be at least divisible by 1. And that's why we use AND here, and inside we will use OR. What's going to be in the left and right sides of the OR? Well, on the left side we will have number divided by the 3, we'll have the remainder of 0, or number divided by the number 7 will have a remainder of 0. So if we use OR here, it means one of those should be true in order to have this parentheses output a true value. And inside of this parentheses is important, so that's why we put it into parentheses, such that one of those can be false, but this inside of this parenthesis should be true to make this happen, make it a lucky number. So we have this as a requisite: number has to be negative, number has to be divisible by 8, and number has to be divisible by 3 or 7, or both. Or that's how the OR works. Only one side of these or both sides should be true in order to have an output of true. And in AND, both sides should be true, otherwise it will output false. And then here is the important part. Considering that if is username, considering that the username input is the same as the predefined username, and is password, and is lucky. So if all those 3 variables are true, means that the requirements are fulfilled, that we can log into the system. So I opened that condition. If that is the case, well, we'll print hello world. Not hello world, but logged in. It says logged in, welcome to the system. But if any of those are not fulfilled, if any of those cases are false, it means that you're failed. You were not able to log into the system. Then I'm going to use else, because it fits our needs well, because I don't need to define in what cases I'm able to log in. I can either log in or not. So there's only one case in which I can log in, so I will use else. Anything other than that is print no access. So that was pretty much all about it. Let's run the program and see how it works. Well, there's username. It asks for username. I will say user admin 84. I will say the password is admin. By the way, don't use this password in the real life. It will get broken in real fast. And lucky number, any lucky number that's divisible by those. I will say 28 maybe. No, not 28. It's not. Let's say 0. It says no access. Oh, it's interesting because actually 0 is negative. Is not negative, so that's why it gave us no access. And I will say same thing, user admin 84 admin and say negative 24, which is actually negative, is divisible by 8 and is divisible by one of those two. This is divisible by 3 actually. So it says logged in. So this was it. Thank you for watching. See you next time.